Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and others. The peculiar lefty here. Today I'm going to talk about the EU referendum, specifically about why I'll be voting to remain in the EU. Before I get to that, though, let's get some myths out of the way. Firstly, leaving the EU is not an exclusively right-wing idea. In fact, plenty on the right are pro-EU. David Cameron wants us to remain, as does Tony Blair, as does Gordon Brown, as does George Osborne. Margaret Thatcher was pro-EU. John Major recently put his weight behind the Remain camp. And meanwhile, over on the pro-Brexit side, we have Tony Benn and Rob Crow, both of whom are sadly no longer with us. Not to mention literally every socialist party in the UK. Tusk, CPG-BML, SWP, all of them. Every fucking one. Now, granted, the Leave campaign has been dominated by the right, and I'll be coming back to that later, but to try and argue that only racists and other reactionaries want to leave the EU, and by extension that there is no left-wing case for leaving the EU, is extremely dishonest. Secondly, and this is again directed at Leave voters, having concerns about immigration does not make you stupid or racist. Being worried about terrorism, being worried about losing your job, all that is perfectly normal. If the only way that the left deals with those concerns is to call people racists, then we're not going to convince anyone, we're not going to make any progress, we're just going to irritate people and alienate the public. Now, granted, plenty of people who worry about immigration are racists, but a lot of the time, people worry about immigration just because they're ill-informed. They don't know the facts. They have fallen for the propaganda that you see in so many newspapers, that you see all the time on TV. Right? You've got to inform people to counter that. We have to create our own propaganda, distribute proper information, not just shout racist at anyone who disagrees with us. Just for the record, I am in favour of open borders. I am pro-immigration, but there are plenty of people who disagree with me on that, and that doesn't make them bloody neo-Nazis or whatever. My third and final point is this. The EU cannot be reformed. We can't build a better Europe. I mean, yeah, there is a very slim chance that sometime in the future we might be able to make it slightly less awful. But at the end of the day, the European Union is a union of capitalist imperialist states. And as a result of that, it will always be a capitalist imperialist organisation. So here's why I'll be voting in anyway. All right, the major argument that Brexit supporters use when confronted with all the economic benefits of EU membership is that those benefits don't come from being in the EU, but from being a part of the common market. I then go on to point out that were we to leave the EU, we'd still be in the common market, and so we'd still be able to reap all the benefits of the EU without being subject to their legislation. The reality, though, is quite the opposite. Now, if you ignore all other external factors and look exclusively at whether the other EU countries would be better off with Britain in the common EU market or Britain out of the common European market, it seems like a no-brainer. They'd obviously keep their business relationship with us as friendly as possible because they make a lot of money from us. But when you start to look at the bigger picture, things look very, very different. So the people who run the EU, the big powerful economies like Germany, for example, are scared. They know how much anti-EU sentiment there already is in a whole host of countries like Greece, France, that have been negatively impacted by EU austerity. They know that if the EU leaves and is seen to do well, that will lead to a massive growth in anti-EU sentiment and could well lead to more people leaving the EU, could well lead to the dissolution of the European Union entirely. Now that's a scary thought for them. Right? They want to maintain their power. They want to maintain their hold on these countries. So if we leave, they'll want to make an example of us to make sure we don't inspire other countries to leave. I mean, there's already been threats to put tariffs on British goods being sold in the EU, which would make us unable to compete with EU member states. Mark my words, if we fuck with Germany on this, they will do everything they can to cripple us economically. They will not mess about with this. We've got to be careful what kind of enemies we're making. And if we want to make an enemy of the powerhouse economy of the EU, that's not going to turn out well. Picture the scene. Once we leave, straight away the economy is going to take a nosedive. I mean, as soon as the results of the polls come in, this is if we get a successful Leave vote, just because of the uncertainty and the loss of confidence that will result from that. After that, we'll have to contend with the long-term effects of a pissed-off Brussels coming after us with everything they've got, combined with the natural economic problems that would come from a Brexit even under ideal conditions. Parts of the UK that benefit most from EU funding, that's parts of Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and the north of England primarily, would feel it more than anywhere else. And when you consider that those areas tend to be less wealthy than southern England as it is, that's, it's not going to be good for them. It'd be a serious blow, especially for disadvantaged communities in those places. I've heard some people say, sort of taking an accelerationist viewpoint, that an economic crisis would be good for the left because it would be a valuable recruiting tool. To be perfectly honest, I think those people are living in a fucking fantasy world. Political landscape of this country is overwhelmingly Thatcherite. Even the anti-austerity movement here is dominated by liberals or at the very most social democrats. The radical left in the EU, The radical left in the UK basically does not exist. I'm not saying that to denigrate people or put anyone down. There are comrades all over the UK doing great work. I'm just saying that realistically, we do not have the numbers or the organisation to fight a far-right surge. And we're not going to be able to recruit enough people to change that. And bear in mind, when I talk about a far-right surge, that's what's going to happen if we leave. All the factors that are already present already would be intensified by us leaving the EU. Economic crisis, nationalistic and anti-immigrant propaganda in the media, and of course a weak left. And that's without even mentioning the enormous confidence boost that a successful Leave vote would give to people like UKIP and Britain First. Remember earlier when I said that every socialist party in the country is publicly backing a Brexit, and the Leave campaign is still dominated by the right? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. We finally have an issue where anarchists, Marxist-Leninists and the 57 varieties of Trotskyist are all on the same page, are all saying basically the same thing, and we still can't drown out the voices of people like Nigel Farage. We're not the Bolsheviks in 1917 here, we're more like the KPD in 1933, right? Obviously, I'm not saying that leaving the EU would result in a fascist government. That'd be exactly the kind of scaremongering that I can't fucking stand in this debate. But it would lead to, almost certainly, to an increase in the membership of far-right groups and an upsurge in the violence perpetuated by the far right. And after all that, we still wouldn't be able to take down the EU. They'd try and make an example of us to scare the rest of the dissident nations, and they would be successful. No one would want to leave after seeing the effect that a Brexit would have on us. I was in favour of leaving the EU for a long time. I've been on the fence about it for even longer, but I genuinely think that staying in the EU is the lesser of two evils, and that is why I will be voting in. Thanks very much for watching. Feel free to like, share and subscribe, or not, whatever. Yeah. Happy Father's Day to everybody as well.